There's a specific kind of tired that sleep doesn't fix. You wake up after 8 hours and you still feel it. That low, quiet heaviness sitting somewhere behind your chest. Not sadness exactly. Not burnout in the way people describe it. Just empty. Like you've been running on something for a long time, and whatever that something was, it's finally run out. And the strange part, you can't always explain it to anyone, because from the outside your life looks fine. You're functioning, you're showing up, you're answering messages and making plans and doing what needs to be done. But on the inside, something has gone very, very quiet. If you've ever felt that, this video is going to explain exactly what's happening underneath it. Not to fix it, just to finally make it make sense. People who are emotionally exhausted don't always look the way you'd expect. They're not always crying. They're not always withdrawn. In fact, a lot of them are remarkably good at appearing okay. They laugh at the right moments. They ask how you're doing. They hold conversations, keep commitments, maintain relationships. They're present, technically. But if you look a little closer, you start to notice the edges. They take longer to reply to messages, not because they don't care, but because even a simple text requires a kind of emotional energy they're currently running very low on. They start avoiding small decisions, what to eat, what to watch, where to go, because their capacity for choice feels depleted in a way that seems disproportionate to the situation. They go quiet in conversations that don't demand them to speak, and they feel guilty about all of it, because they can't point to a single obvious reason for why they feel this way. This is one of the most misunderstood things about emotional exhaustion. It doesn't always come from one dramatic event. Most of the time it's accumulated, it's layered. It's the result of months or years of giving more than was ever given back. Not always in dramatic ways, but in small, invisible ones. Here's what's actually happening beneath that exhaustion. The human emotional system, the part that regulates how we connect, how we respond, how we process the world around us, it operates a bit like a bank account. Every interaction, every decision, every emotional demand made on you makes a withdrawal, and every moment of genuine rest, genuine connection, genuine safety makes a deposit. Emotional exhaustion happens when the withdrawals have been outpacing the deposits for so long that you're operating on an overdraft you didn't even know you'd accumulated. And the people most prone to this, they're usually not the ones you call fragile. They're often the most capable ones in the room. The people who are quietly responsible for holding things together. Relationships, families, friendships, workplaces, the ones others come to, the ones who are taught, either explicitly or just through experience, that their role is to give, to support, to be steady, to not need too much themselves. And so they got very good at that. They adapted. They became highly attuned to other people's needs, highly skilled at reading a room, highly practiced at managing their own emotions internally rather than expressing them, because expressing them felt risky, or inconvenient, or like it would create a problem they'd then have to manage anyway. That's not weakness. That's a survival pattern that formed for a very real reason. And here's where it gets interesting, because emotional exhaustion isn't just about doing too much. It's about a specific kind of disconnection that builds over time. A disconnection from your own interior experience. When you spend long enough prioritizing other people's feelings, other people's needs, other people's comfort, you gradually lose the habit of checking in with your own. You stop noticing what you actually want in a situation before you're already responding to what everyone else wants. You start filtering your own emotions through the question of how they'll land on other people before you've even let yourself fully feel them. And eventually, you become emotionally fluent in everyone else's world and a stranger in your own. This is the real pattern at the center of emotional exhaustion. Not just the depletion, but the distance. The sense of being somehow far away from yourself. Of watching your own life slightly from the outside. Of knowing you should feel things more deeply than you do, but finding that the feeling keeps arriving muted, delayed, or not at all. Psychologists sometimes describe this as emotional numbing, but it's not a flaw. It's protective. When the emotional system gets overloaded for long enough, it starts rationing. It conserves. It pulls back from sensation the same way a body goes cold to protect its core temperature. It's not shutting down. It's self-preserving. But there's a layer beneath even that, and it's the one that tends to hit the hardest when people finally stop moving long enough to notice it. Emotional exhaustion over time starts to reshape how a person sees themselves. Because when you've been in this state for a while, when you've been running on low operating from obligation rather than desire, giving more than you're receiving, numbing, what's too much to feel, you start to lose access to the parts of yourself that felt most alive. The things that used to excite you stop pulling at you the way they once did. The relationships that used to feel like relief start to feel like more weight, and you begin to quietly wonder whether you're simply becoming a smaller version of who you used to be, or whether maybe that more alive version of you was never really sustainable to begin with. That thought, that quiet erosion of identity, is one of the loneliest aspects of emotional exhaustion, because it's not something most people talk about. Saying "I'm tired" is socially acceptable. Saying "I feel like I'm disappearing from myself" is harder to put into a sentence. And so it goes unsaid, and the distance grows. What's important to understand here is that this isn't a character change, it's a resource change. The person underneath the exhaustion is still fully there. The curiosity, the warmth, the aliveness, it hasn't gone anywhere. It's been redirected for so long for so many people that there's simply nothing left running it in the background for you. But here's the real insight, the one that most conversations about emotional exhaustion miss entirely. People who end up in this state usually got there not because they didn't know their limits, but because they were taught, somewhere along the way, that their limits were negotiable. That pushing through was a virtue, that needing was inconvenient, that asking for rest was something you had to earn first, and so they internalized a standard that was never actually fair. They learned to measure their worth by their output, by how little they complained, by how much they could carry without showing the weight. And the more they carried, the more capable they appeared, and the more capable they appeared, the more they were asked to carry, until the system they built to protect themselves became the very thing depleting them. It was never random. It was a pattern. A very old, very logical, very quietly exhausting pattern. And the moment someone starts to see that, not to fix it immediately, but just to see it clearly for the first time, something subtle shifts, because it's much harder to be at war with a pattern you understand. It's much easier to be patient with yourself when you can see exactly how you got here. Emotional exhaustion, at its core, is what happens when a person has been living for a very long time on the outside of themselves, attending to everything external, other people's needs, other people's comfort, the demands of the moment, the expectations of the role, while the internal world goes quiet and unattended. Not out of laziness, not out of weakness, but out of a deep-running habit of putting yourself last. That was so practiced and so normalized, it stopped feeling like a choice and started feeling like just the way things were. The behavior patterns, the small withdrawals, the avoidance of confrontation, the people-pleasing, the muted emotions, the sense of watching yourself from a distance. They're not character flaws. They're data. They're a record of how long the system has been running without adequate care. And recognizing that, actually, sitting with that recognition rather than immediately trying to fix it or push past it, that's not a small thing. That's actually a very significant thing. Because once you can see the pattern clearly, you're no longer just inside it. You're observing it. And that small shift in perspective is often where something begins to quietly change. It was never about being weak. It was about being human for a very long time without anyone noticing, including you. And that awareness alone changes something. If this explains something you haven't been able to put into words before, there's more to explore here. Understanding your own patterns is the beginning of everything.